Welcome to this James the Bike Guy. Today we're checking out the 2021 Specialized Diverge Sport Carbon. This is Specialized newly revamped carbon fiber gravel bike, and the sport level is one of the entry-level models with the carbon frame. So in this video we're going to be checking out what this bike is all about. We'll go over the features and designs of the bike, find out the part spec that comes on it, and of course, we'll find out exactly what it weighs. So if this kind of thing is interesting to you, I hope you stick around, check out this bike, and then of course, hit that subscribe button if you feel it's right. So checking out this bike, this is a really neat looking bike. So the Specialized Diverge has been around for quite some time now, and it was one of the first mainline offerings of a gravel bike from a major manufacturer. The version we're looking at here is in its third generation, and the third generation of this bike, I really think it's come into its own. They've made some significant changes to the geometry of the frame, the part specs that come with it, that help bring this bike from being a modified endurance bike to being a whole-on gravel bike. You know, when we think about some of those changes, what is neat is they've really allowed this to modify to where on the road it still has good performance, but off-road it immediately elevates. You know, Specialized in doing their geometry changes have basically made the reach of the bike quite a bit longer than it was before, the fork offset being a bit more slack than it was before. Bottom bracket has been raised a little bit from the previous generations, meaning when you combine this with the slacker front end with the longer reach and the adjustment to the bottom bracket height, that's going to make the bike have quite a bit more stability when descending, but the fork offset is such that it's still going to turn and handle pretty well, and then that bottom bracket adjustment is going to help base your body and your weight into a spot where when you're off-road on gravel or you're descending down a steep hill, you're going to have tons of control, but it's still going to be nimble enough to go edge to edge. Now, I personally had the second generation of this bike, and it was a really nice option. I really enjoyed having it, and checking out this one, I can see where some of those upgrades and opportunities came in. Now, aside from the geometry changes that have happened for this year, there's quite a bit to talk about with the frame. So I mentioned in the beginning of the video that this is a carbon fiber frame, and this is being made out of their Fact 8R carbon. So this is going to be a pretty neat looking setup, and then as we look forward on the bike, you'll notice there's almost some aerodynamic shaping, although they don't call that out on the down tube, that comes to very nice looking shape as it gets to the tapered head tube. And the direction of the frame, I think, has gone pretty nicely into making it look quite nice. Now up front, you'll notice a suspension piece. So this is what's called the Future Shock 1.5. This is going to allow for 25 millimeters of suspension compliance in the front end. It also allows for, with that spacer that you see just above the head tube, that plastic spacer comes in 3 different heights. So you're able to adjust the stack and reach of the bike. And by having the 25 millimeters of suspension on top of the frame, you're not going to be slowing down the movement of the bike by having splay in the front end where it's soaking up the bumps, but instead you won't have the bob because it's in an axial direction to make sure that everything is compressing and suspending the rider rather than the bike. You'll notice that the back end of the bike has the seat stay divorced from the top tube, and they're able to do that along with this 27.2 seat post to be able to get a lot more compliance in the back end of the bike. Now with that carbon seat post, the drop stay, it's allowing that rearward flex to the bike. So you can see that chain stay is going straight from the rear end of the bike right into where it is with the front crankset. And that connection is being able to be done without having to use a drop stay. You can see from this shot, it's a compressed solid piece of carbon rather than having a hollow tube, and that's allowing the chain stay to be thin enough that you can still run absolutely massive up to 47mm wide tires on a 700C wheel, but also still have that double crankset in the front. And that's pretty neat to be pieced together without the interesting looks or the potential weak points that are included in having a drop stay. Along with the carbon beam construction, it's got a 68mm threaded bottom bracket, so the Shimano GRX drivetrain threads in and you don't have to worry about any creaks or groans that can come from a press fit bottom bracket. And the frame, you'll notice, is all internally cable routed. So all the routing comes right into the frame, goes all the way through, and you'll notice how clear it is. And then you're going to have down tube, seat tube water bottle mounts. You're going to have a beneath down tube mount as well. And then on the top tube, you'll notice you're also going to have, moving on from those frame features, it's important to mention the tire sizes that are going to mount on this bike. So this is coming through with some 700C wheels, but this can fit up to a 700 by 47mm wide tire, but it can also run a 650B by 2.1 inch tire. So this is really getting into mountain bike territory as far as tire size, and it's neat to see that wide range of usage. That helps solidify that this could be considered what one might say is a mountain biker's road bike. Moving on from that setup, we should talk about the drivetrain. So this bike is going to be set up with some Shimano GRX drivetrain. This is a 2x11 drivetrain. It runs the Shimano GRX 810 11-speed rear derailleur, which is going to have a clutch that you can turn on and off for very quiet and controlled chain. It's going to go through a Shimano 105 11-34 cassette, and then it's powered forward to this Shimano GRX crankset. This crankset is going to be a 46-32 chainring combination, so that means it's running a subcompact chainring, and you're going to be paired up with a 4611 for your largest gears up front, and then the climbing gears, you've got a 34 out back and a 30, which means that this is going to have less than a 1-to-1 ratio, which is just quite impressive. So with a 30 up front and 34 out back, it should have plenty of range to be able to be climbing up some hills. Of course, the back end of the bike is also set up with through axle, running a 12 by 142 through axle out back. And then up front, it's going to have a 12 by 100mm through axle. And through axles do a good job of tying the frame together to make it both stiffer and more precise being used, but it makes for a bit easier setup taking the wheels on and off on a bike with disc brakes, meaning that you can drop them right in and not have to worry about the wheel coming on the lines. We can also see on that chainstay where the shifter cable is going through, you'll see that there's this small little ripple effect on what looks like a chain protector. And that's exactly what it is, but the ripple effect allows when the chain were to be bouncing and hitting that chainstay protector, both not to damage the paint, but it's also going to help silence the chain. They started doing this a little while ago on their specialized stump jumper mountain bikes, and by having those little points, you don't get quite the same slap noise that you would otherwise. Now, shifting and slowing the bike down, we've got GRX shifters. These are the GRX 600, so it's a hydraulic brake, mechanical shifting, runs mineral oil, and they're put at this slight cant so that when you're in the drop position or you're bouncing around, the shift lever position is going to be quite a bit easier to be able to get a hold of. Now they operate some GRX hydraulic disc calipers. The calipers themselves are 2-piston calipers, both on the front and the rear, clamping down on 160mm rotors. The cockpit that you have going on is the specialized Adventure Gear hover handlebar. This is a handlebar with a 70mm reach, which is quite short, and a drop of 103mm, while it flares out sideways 12 degrees. And that 12-degree flare to the outside allows, when you're in the drops, that your forearm doesn't rub against the top portion of the bar even when you're bouncing around. You'll also notice that the stem on the bike is going to be a specialized future stem. This is the comp level, which is aluminum with a 31.8 bar clamp, but it's quite a bit shorter than you maybe would be used to. And that's because they're putting that together with the longer reach of the bike, making sure that the cockpit and the fit is just right, so even with a longer reach of the bike, you don't have to shorten up the front end. Now, on the back, you've got the specialized power saddle. This is a truncated nose saddle and the sport version, so it has steel rails, but it's mounted up on the 27.2 millimeter carbon seat post. For a wheel set, you've got the DT Swiss G540 rims. These rims are a 24 millimeter internal width. They are tubeless ready, and they run 24 spokes both in the front and the rear. And then they're wrapped with the specialized Pathfinder Sport tire. These tires are 738 millimeters in width. They're a sport level tire, so not tubeless ready, and I wish they came out of the box that way, but I'll tell you, that matched up with those DT Swiss rims, you've got a pretty nice setup that's only a tire set away from being able to be tubeless ready. So now that we've taken a look at the 2021 Specialized Diverge Sport Carbon, let's go ahead and find out what it weighs. Well, thanks so much for checking out the Specialized Diverge Sport Carbon. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. While you're at it, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. It really helps to know that you enjoyed the video, and YouTube definitely appreciates the likes. While you're at it, if you enjoyed this, definitely hit the subscribe button. That way you can see another one of these videos here in the future.